I've said it once and I'll say it again, but liking the Nissan Pathfinder can be compared to liking the band Nickelback or being really good at roller skating. You gotta be careful with who you tell. The chairman of Nissan for North America has already come out and said if it doesn't sell cars, doesn't take care of the customer, or doesn't make any kind of money for the company, they're going to look at freezing, postponing, or canceling those programs within Nissan. And here we have the Nissan Z. I actually like the look of it, and I think a lot of people do. However, Nissan did a pretty poor job at marketing this right out of the gate. You can mark my words, as soon as they do away with the naturally aspirated V6 in this Frontier here, it will become more desirable. You'll watch the values of the used examples remain quite high, remain quite steady. Having lived in Washington, D.C. for a little bit for work, I can tell you that there is a real thing called big Ultima energy, right? It's always a Nissan Altima, always maybe 5 to 10 years old, just ripping through traffic, cutting people off, driving like a complete lunatic. Hey YouTube, Untamed here. It should come as no surprise that Nissan has been struggling for quite some time. Just this last year in 2024, Nissan reported a $4.6 billion loss. That is the largest loss that they had since the Japanese economic bubble collapsed in the 90s. So things are definitely rough for the brand. We talked about the recent attempted merger between Honda and Nissan, but well, that fell flat on its face. In today's video, I'm going to highlight the many reasons as to why the brand has been suffering, especially throughout the last few years, and what it means for you and I, the consumer, if you were to go consider buying a Nissan brand new right now. So stick with me. There's just no more brand reputation, right? I mean, there's no loyal customers following Nissan anymore. Personally, I do believe that the Nissan Frontier is a very wise option. It sports a 3.8-liter naturally aspirated V6 underneath the hood. It is a very raw, simple, mid-sized pickup truck, and nowadays that's hard to come by. It truly is the last of its kind, and I firmly believe that. You have now the tiny displacement 4-cylinder turbocharged options like the Chevy Colorado, GMC Canyon, of course the Toyota Tacoma over there with a 2.4-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder underneath the hood, or a hybridized 4-cylinder for the iForce Max. And when you combine that with the fact that their price tags have been shot to the moon on all of the competition, the Nissan Frontier, especially the Pro 4X here behind me, this begins to make sense. You can easily get one for right around that $40,000 mark after some discounts. This makes sense. A lot of people actually like the Nissan Frontier for the same reasons why they used to like the Toyota Tacoma or the Toyota Tundra. Really, Toyotas in general used to be three things, right? Reliable, simplistic, and affordable. All three of those things for Toyota has totally gone out the window, whereas you still get it here with the Frontier. Let me remind you of how much they want from MSRP-wise. All right, so this here is a 2025 example of the Pro 4X. There you have it. $46,260. Although that's nothing to scoff at, that's still quite steep. But when you compare that to any Toyota Tacoma over there on Toyota's lot, many of those are well over $50,000, $55,000 up to $68,000 for the Trail Hunter and TRD Pro. So this right here begins to make sense. Not to mention, let's see what they have here. 3.9% interest rate up to 60 months. So you get an incentivized interest rate through Nissan. One thing Nissan corporate has done is they've encouraged their dealerships to try to move metal. They want them to move their metal so they can pump out the volume, right? And that's where Nissan's going to succeed. They're not going to succeed by maximizing how much they sell their vehicles for. They want to discount the vehicles. So even Nissan corporate is encouraging them to slash prices and offer those incentivized interest rates. $41,000 over here. Really, throughout the last 2 years, Nissan has been doing a number of cuts to both personnel as well as their manufacturing capabilities and their plants. Well, they just recently announced that they'll be cutting 11,000 more employees. 11,000 more employees around the world, as well as shutting down 7 more of their plants. And believe it or not, much of Nissan's losses are taking place around the world, not so much in the North American market. But within the next 2 years, the current CEO, Ivan Espinoza, has already declared that he will be cutting $1.8 billion of their overall budget within North America alone. So that's just one cost-cutting measure in order for them to get back on track. Similar to what the US government is doing right now, Nissan has employed over 300 experts to come into the company and really dig deep into determining what can be cut. What kind of savings can Nissan see moving forward? So 300 experts really turning over every leaf, every portfolio, and really determining how they can save money and cut costs, all while sustaining 3 things. How can they continue to sell cars, take care of their customer, and continue to make profit for the company, right? One thing that really hurt Nissan was their lease buyback program. They had maybe too much confidence when they instituted that program, meaning when they leased out their vehicles and then brought them back in, they had thought many of those vehicles would sustain a higher residual value, sustain a higher resale value, and well, that did not prove to be the case. So it ended up being Nissan leasing vehicles out for a few years, then bringing them back, and then taking a huge hit on each of those vehicles. A tremendous hit. So much so where the brand, the company at large, has lost so much money because of it. They're still trying to recover. One part of their savings right now is Nissan is not going to be investing so much into their future powertrains, looking forward to future generations so much. They're focusing on the now. They're focusing on their current lineup and maximizing their ability to sell those vehicles, incentivizing dealers the best they can anyway, to try to move their existing metal. How can we get these cars, all these cars, out the door the fastest? Now, in a world that is just beyond the markup era, where so many dealerships were quick to lick their lips and lick their chops to try to hit you with a $10,000 over MSRP deal, Nissan is doing quite the opposite right now. They are overly incentivizing their dealers to move their metal. They're incentivizing, hey, if they sell 90% of their existing inventory, of their existing floor plan within a certain time frame, every single vehicle that they sold, they would get an additional $350 for. So that's pretty unprecedented. Most manufacturers do not offer anything of the sort. So it really is incentivizing dealers to pump out or to sell this inventory, try to maximize the amount of volume that they push out the door. Sorry guys, I don't always shoot a video, but when I do, there's a very loud train just rolling by. I didn't even know there was train tracks up there. How about that? One major rub for so many people when it comes to Nissan is their pivot towards CVTs, continuously variable transmissions, that sequential driving transmission, if you will. No gears along the way, just one continuous gear. If you're unfamiliar, people hate that. And honestly, there's been quite the black eye for the company. So many Nissans have had transmission failures within their CVTs within 60 to 80,000 miles. There's so many reports of that. So that is a huge black eye for the brand at large. And when you combine that with just the depreciation being huge on these things and that reliability factor outside of the CVT not being the greatest, well, people, they begin to take note. I've said it once and I'll say it again, but liking the Nissan Pathfinder can be compared to liking the band Nickelback or being really good at roller skating. You gotta be careful with who you tell. And well, guys, here's my confession. I kind of like the thing, okay? And well, quite frankly, I kind of like Nickelback too. I'm gonna watch my sub count just fall after saying that. But here we go. Rock Creek edition of this Pathfinder, $46,505. I think it looks good. I've always kind of liked it, especially the Rock Creek edition, a little bit more off-road oriented version of it. But I do believe that vehicles like this and vehicles like the Nissan Rogue, they could be successful, right? I mean, some tweaks and maybe some adjustment to the price tag a little bit, these could sell well within the United States. Quite frankly, when it comes to the Nissan Rogue, there are not too many options within this segment that cost around that price point. There's not too many vehicles around $33,000 in general, let alone like a Toyota Camry, right? But for a small SUV for 33 grand, I don't know, at least it's coming brand new, it's coming with a manufacturer warranty. Kind of feels like a why not situation. And another example here with the Nissan Kicks. This one happens to be an SR trimmed example. Let me show you how much they want for these. So 2025 Nissan Kicks and just over $30,000. Again, nothing to write home to mom about, but at that price point, it just kind of makes sense for a lot of folks, right? I mean, you can't go buy a brand new vehicle, a subcompact SUV for $30,000. Many of them are well over 40 grand at this point. So you tell me, would you consider one of these? And honestly, I'm kind of sad for Nissan because obviously, well, if you haven't picked up on it by now, I actually do have a level of appreciation for the brand, right? And when you talk to anybody, you'll quickly realize that they too have a level of appreciation for Nissan. Nobody really wants to see Nissan go under, but oftentimes after you talk to anybody for any length of time, it's because of Nissan's quote unquote glory days. They often think back to the 90s, like the Nissan GTR R34, right? The Nissan Silvia. They think of these iconic cars. When people look back and think back to when Nissan was in its quote unquote heyday or glory days, Nissan wasn't afraid to be edgy. They weren't afraid to take risks. Whereas nowadays, you can't help but feel that. I mean, look at much of the vehicles here. So many of them are just so bland and boring, and there's no excitement within it. So you can't fault people for not wanting to come out here and shell out all this cash for a bland, boring Nissan. The glory days of the 90s of them making these pretty wild, iconic examples, well, those days are gone. Of course, we have the Nissan GTR, but really that has been priced to the moon, and not your average Joe or Jane can go buy that GTR. Same goes for the Z. The Z, when you compare it to things like the Toyota Supra, it's hard to justify buying that new Z by comparison, right? They've been priced to the moon and they kind of priced out their target demographic, unfortunately. Nissan has seen a whole lot of turbulence over recent years. Heck, just within an 8-year span, the company has seen 4 different CEOs. A lot of people will jokingly refer to Nissan as the Chrysler of Japan, always in the shadows of Toyota. The current CEO, Ivan, I think is how they pronounce it, Ivan is going to be reintroducing the Nissan Silvia as well as bringing a new generation of the GTR, hoping to bring some more excitement back to the brand. You know, I can tell you, after having lived in Washington, D.C. for a little bit for work, I can tell you that there is a real thing called big Ultima energy, right? It's always a Nissan Altima, always maybe 5 to 10 years old, just ripping through traffic, cutting people off, driving like a complete lunatic, and it always happens to be a Nissan Altima. There's actually a pretty funny Facebook page called Big Ultima Energy. Check it out. It's quite hilarious. Okay, but that's true. And I would think the same goes for people who buy the V6 version of their sports car that could come in a V8. I'm talking like the Dodge Challenger, the Charger, the Camaro, the Mustang. People who buy the V6 versions of those vehicles, for some reason or another, drive like lunatics. I don't understand why. You can mark my words, as soon as they do away with the naturally aspirated V6 in this Frontier here, it will become more desirable. You'll watch the values of the used examples remain quite high, remain quite steady. So mark my words, maybe next couple of years when they do away with the naturally aspirated platform, just like they did with the Nissan Titan, people are going to miss this, and they're going to miss it quickly. Real quickly, let me remind you what they want for these Nissan Altimas. This one appears to be the fanciest version here, 4.9% interest rate for up to 60 months. I would wager that you can get that in addition to a pretty good discount off of this price. So just under $38,000 for the 2025 Nissan Altima with the 2.5 liter. This is the SL trim. I'll show you out back. We got the SR model over here. Let's see how much I want for this one. This one here, slightly less, just over $35,000 for the SR. Honestly, if my kiddos were of driving age, 15, 16, 17 years old, I would strongly consider getting one of these Nissan Versas, right? Mainly because, hey, it's brand new, comes with a warranty, right? They're safe, they have good crash test ratings. And look at the price tag, $21,000. Obviously, there's safer options, don't get me wrong here, but still, at least you're getting a brand new vehicle. Obviously, that one here is a 2024 model. Many of these are, and that's the case across many dealerships, as you guys know. And just for comparison's sake, here is the 2025 model of the Nissan Kicks. And look at this, skidamarinka-dinka-dink. This is the 2024 example of it. So, pretty drastic change to the back end. Let me show you the front end, too, for fun, to show you how much has changed. Okay, there you have it. And then, wow, quite the change between them. Let me compare the price tags for fun, okay? So year old, this looks like it's from 1998 at this point. $23,745 for this S version of the Kicks. And well over here, hey, we have the best deals. How about that? And, well, it went up a couple $1,000s, but that's money well spent when it comes to the appearance alone. Then you have examples like this Nissan Murano, priced just under $50,000. I would have a very difficult time buying this segment, this particular vehicle, over, let's say, a Toyota Grand Highlander or Highlander, right? That makes more sense to me. Although smaller, I think I would also opt to get a Toyota RAV4 instead of this, too. It would take a lot for me to be incentivized enough to get this, and that's going to take a really good interest rate, an incentivized interest rate over 60 or 72 months, and a pretty substantial discount, getting this close to $40,000 or even a little bit under it. That's what it'd take for me. What about you? You know, I might have spoke too soon. They do have a little placard. No, so that's not good enough. 4.9% over 60 months. That is not good enough for this Murano. This one is over $50,000, just under $51,000 for this SL trimmed example of it. You know, this needs to be coming with a 1.9% interest rate, or even better than that, and maybe $5,000 to $6,000 off, just for you to consider it, in my opinion. And honestly, that's a rub for so many Nissan buyers. The depreciation hit that you take immediately after buying this, driving it off the lot, and just putting a few miles on it is quite substantial. Obviously, this dealership's asking a little bit of a premium for this 2024 Nissan Sentra with 10,000, just under 11,000 miles on it. This here, I mean, this vehicle means maybe in a high $18,000, $19,000 range on a good day. But obviously, used vehicles are actually becoming a little bit more desirable, given the fact that new examples have been priced to the moon across the board. And here we have the Nissan Z. I actually like the look of it, and I think a lot of people do. However, Nissan did a pretty poor job at marketing this right out of the gate. Not only did they kind of overdo and overhype it way too far in advance, by the time that this actually began hitting dealership lots, people have already kind of forgotten about it, unfortunately, right? And then tell me if you agree with that. But they drug it out far too long. I do think this particular example looks good. This is the Heritage Edition version of the Nissan Z. I think I showed this to you guys maybe 3 or 4 months ago. I even said at that time, this will likely sit on the dealership lot for several months. Already at 2024, many months old already at this point. But $61,000, there's your Heritage Edition badge. It's a sweet car, but for that price point, there are so many other options that are better to consider, I think. You guys tell me. Not to mention, if you're going to buy a vehicle like the Nissan Z here, you better get a manual. I understand not everybody can drive a manual, I mean health condition reasons, I understand, but this particular vehicle, it just makes sense to row through the gears with a manual transmission. This one here is an automatic. Another reason why it will be sitting for many more months. I'll wrap up the video there, guys. I personally believe Nissan will do whatever it takes in order to stay afloat. You know, they have a lot of people from the outside looking at their processes, looking at their programs, their portfolios in order to maximize their savings and really improve their revenue overall, right? They're gonna look at what is actually able to be cut across the board. So I do think they're going to do well and they're going to be successful in doing that. However, I do think there is still rough waters ahead. Maybe the next year and a half, they're going to continue that downward spiral. But after that, I think they'll make a pretty notable pivot and they'll resuscitate this company, resuscitate the brand. That's what at least I'm hopeful for. Let me know what your thoughts are. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you taking the time to tune into these videos. What do you want to see from Nissan moving forward? Would you like to see them go bankrupt, or are you hopeful that they will make a return and a triumphant one at that? So thanks for watching. If you haven't already, please consider liking and subscribing. Your support means a ton, and I promise it doesn't go unnoticed. Until next time.